What's up, church family? Tyson Compton here, and thank you again for joining me in another conversation. We were joined today by Mike Butt, the longest tenured elder here at Southwest, and what a pleasure it was. It was a true blessing to be able to sit across from him and ask some amazing questions, but hear even better answers. And I hope you enjoy as much as fun as I had giving the interview. Sit back, relax. The conversation takes a bunch of turns, but it is definitely worth a listen, and I'm excited to hear more about it from you guys. Please do not hesitate to come up and ask Mike about it, as well as hopefully engage in some more conversations with you and your friends. We'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you on Sunday. Thanks, guys. Start talking. I was like, how long you been an elder? Like, how long you been a member of the church? How long you been an elder?
Okay. I've been a member of the church for about probably 38 to 39 years.
Wow.
Cody was not yet 1 year old, and he turns 40 here in a few weeks.
My goodness.
So that's how long we've been members here at Southwest, and became a Christian.
Yeah.
Put on the Lord in baptism. Became an elder in the neighborhood of 16 to 17 years. I'm not exactly sure. I actually have the meeting minutes from the first meeting I attended with a date and everything, and I visited occasionally, so I know it's in that range of 16 to 17, but I'm not absolutely sure at the moment.
And didn't you, if I remember, because when I started the church, we kind of had a couple different small groups, like some, elder, young couple mentorships. So you guys were looking for a church initially. You found this church.
What had happened was Cody was born, and in my early 20 years, drifted away from the Lord.
Right.
I grew up as a Lutheran, went through the baptism, the catechism, kind of a weird story there. I was actually baptized at age 5.
Right.
And I remember it.
Oh.
And my dad was baptized the same day, and so he would have been 35.
Wow.
And so it's kind of an interesting dichotomy or interesting memory that I have about that.
Relatively young memory.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I remember them wiping the water off my forehead and giving me the little Kleenex or napkin or whatever they used. But long story short, Alice and I had Cody. There was this pull inside that said there's more to being a parent that I know what to deal with, and I need some help, and something's missing. And so we had been visiting churches around town. Allison grew up Presbyterian and Methodist. I grew up Lutheran. We were visiting other churches, more along the vein of what we'd been attending.
Yeah.
Then my grandma, who was kind of my rock. My grandma, she had a heart attack and she died. And we went to get her funeral planned, and her pastor, she attended a Baptist church. Her pastor was unavailable.
Just for whatever reason.
Whatever, he was out of town. I can't remember now. But it's Ann DeBoer now, is my aunt, who was Ann Cruz then.
Okay.
And my uncle was John Cruz. That was my mom's brother.
Okay. They
said, we have a preacher who can do it. Turned out to be Jim Tenery from the Church of Christ. We went to the funeral. Alice and I were both taken by the way he opened Scripture and used it, and how he celebrated my grandma's life. And I mean, it was just a really unique experience to us. And
you encountered God.
Literally. Exactly.
Yeah.
And we said to, I remember saying to Ann or to my uncle, one of the two, we might just visit.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I've got like 4 invitations from different people, and so we decided to attend.
Yeah.
After, I couldn't tell you how long, I'd say somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks, Jim offered to come into our home with Jane and study with us.
Oh, wow.
And so over a period of time, so it was probably anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks of study, decided, to be baptized. But even that, I mean, I'm a guy. Let's put it this way. I'm a guy. I'm proud. I'm stubborn. I'm this.
There you go. Yeah.
I remembered being baptized. I remembered this. I remembered, and I was really resisting to a point.
Yeah.
But I have a very unique God moment, because I was working at the time for HDR, and I had been out of town at Gillette, Wyoming for an on-site inspection. And on the way home, we encountered really bad weather. We're talking a blizzard in the air and whiteout, couldn't see. It's me and 2 pilots in a turboprop plane.
Oh my gosh.
And we're bouncing all over the place, and just as clear as day, the thought came across my mind that if this plane goes down, I'm going to spend eternity in hell.
No kidding.
And that Sunday, I was baptized by Jim, and that was the beginning of my discipleship to the Lord.
Wow. So I'm reading a book right now called Experiencing God. And there's a similar story he equates to a instance of weather or instance of traveling and don't know if you're going to make it. You're watching this truck come, flash before your eyes. My question, I guess, would be the follow-up was, so what was that conversation like? Because you're on the Stirrup plane. You're at the mercy of so many uncontrollables. Mm-hmm. What, do you reference that point often? Because you probably heard his voice, heard or some sort of kind of a premonition, almost like what was going to, what was going on. What was that like?
What I remember about it most was having the discussion with God or with myself that said, Mike, you know what to do. You're just too proud not to do it.
Oh, my goodness.
And, that's why in some of the teachings that when I teach now, I always go back to discipleship.
Yeah.
And one of the places I often start is in baptism, the first thing you do is die to self. Mm-hmm. And then you deny yourself every day. Mm. And that it's so hard to keep that self dead. And that was what was holding me back, was my own pride, my own inability to die to self.
Yeah.
And so that to me was a very pivotal point in an indelible memory, if you will.
When you came home and you landed and you saw your wife, what was that like? Was it one of the first things you talked about?
I know we talked about it. Allison was not in the same place I was.
Oh.
She just wasn't.
Yeah.
And so talking about it and just the whole, she was obviously fearful for me, afraid, she knew what was going on.
Right.
But I got back to it was the Epley Airfield. It's that private airstrip on the one side, or the hangar rather. And I got in my car and I drove home, and I got home and it was kind of surreal the whole time. And I'll be honest, I'm still battling in my own mind a little bit. Mm-hmm. And went to church Sunday morning, sat through the service, sat through the invitation, sat through everything, got up to leave, and turned around and went back and said, I cannot leave without handling this, without doing this. And so that's when I pulled Jim aside and said, Jim, I need to be baptized.
Right. What a great... just that I asked a previous guest about just wrestling with God. I mean, that's a wrestling with God moment. You're like, you're trying to control things, and then all of a sudden you realize, I'm actually not in control. Mm-hmm. But the fear, pride, the ego, the fear of finally release is so daunting. Mm-hmm. How have you, all the in the church and the maybe a parishioner or something comes up to you, how many people do you find deal with that last little bit of just releasing to self, but also releasing that it's God's will, not your will, that he's trying to influence,
I think it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Particularly in men. Mm-hmm. It seems that men want to be in control. Mm-hmm. And they see it as a loss of control. Mm. And in essence, it is. Yeah. You're saying, I'm going to die to me, and, I now am yours. Mm-hmm. And then you're raised from that water as a new creation. Mm. That's a hard step for some men. And I'm not saying it isn't for some women, too.
Yeah.
But I can just go from my experience of sharing the gospel with others, and men seem to get to a point, and then they balk.
Right, yeah.
Some get past it, some do not.
From your experience, what do you think has been some of the catalyst of them being able to get past it?
I think a lot of the times it's encouragement by others, and the willingness to be vulnerable and say, I was right where you are. Mm-hmm. But once I've gotten over it, I've never looked back.
Right.
That seems to help. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's actually the past seems to haunt people. Mm. Like maybe there was someone that went on before, maybe a child, or someone like that. Yeah. And just the thought of, I'm changing my mind about how this all works and how I how I am saved, how I am, given a home in heaven, and they almost feel like they're condemning the other person by what they believe, when what I tell them is God is a gracious God, and He's going to judge every one of our hearts, and you have to be responsible for yours. And like I said, you just have to trust God.
Yeah, it's a big step, and I would consider myself a newer Christian as I dive into the Word. You don't know what you don't know, but you also are influenced by misled views or representations of what God is. Talking about God does not really deal in the world of guilt and shame. That's not his arena. But we feel that from the way that messages are broadcasted at church or parental.
Right.
So it's kind of a struggle or a tug of war in those senses too. So you don't feel like you should go that direction because you see so much of it, from people that like and trust. Yeah. So as over the last, almost 2 decades of being an elder, what would senior elder say to the junior elder as you've been doing this a little longer?
I suppose the one thing that stands out to me is if you look at the flock at Southwest and you look at them from the first A in the directory to the last Z or whatever, every one of them is a unique individual. Every one of them brings a unique perspective.
And talents.
And, talents, gifts.
Yeah.
I mean, the diversity within our congregation is amazing. But leading a flock of that diverse nature, it's only possible with the Holy Spirit. And so your time in prayer, asking the Spirit to give you wisdom, to give you patience, to give you peace, all of those things is so important. And, one thing that's really hard being an elder, and I prefer shepherd, because I see the flock as being the group that I'm,
love that.
Overseeing their spiritual development, even being held accountable for their spiritual health. And yet there's all this other noise. And by that, that's kind of like, I call it my elder noise. In other words, there's budget, there's building issues, there's all kinds of things that really don't have to do with your spiritual well-being
Salvation.
Or mine.
Right.
And yet we have to deal with it. And sometimes it takes up more time than it should. And so you have to be able to step back and deal with the important and let the urgent go to the side. Now, quite honestly, when people come into the eldership, they're relatively mature Christians, and they do have different points of view, sometimes different ideas. And so for me to try to impose on that, I really don't. But the dynamic of the meeting will change as new people come in, but that's usually a good thing. I mean, we just added 3 new ministers in the last little over a year.
Right.
And about a year before that, Brent came into the eldership. And right now, I'm the only elder that was in that room when I started. So the whole dynamic has changed. Matter of fact, the ministers are all different than when I first started, obviously. And so God will bring that body together as a called body, a group within the body, and we're no different than any other. I try to tell people we're no different than anybody else in the body. We have a different set of talents and skills and responsibilities to the body, and we not perform it, but that's what we do. That's our work. And so, but that doesn't make me any better than you or anybody else. And to try to understand all of that and the workings within it, there's going to be differences. There's going to be differences of opinion. And it all comes down to how you deal with that. And being able to be open to listen.
So, curious about, elders of the shepherds, smaller group of folks, when you first came into the church and you got baptized, and then your wife wasn't exactly the same spot. I think it's a really common thing in itself. Maybe the roles might be reversed, where a wife is ready. How did you guys start to study together? How did you guys I heard a quote, if you're both working towards knowing God, you can never really be working apart, right? So how did you guys start that journey as a young Christian couple or new to the church couple? How did you guys start that, like as a married unit?
Well, for us, what happened is it was probably 3 or 4 weeks after I was baptized, Allison decided to be. But that's a whole story for her to tell. Right. That I didn't ask her if I could tell it, so I won't share it. Fair. But she went down through a whole different route than I went over a period of time. And as we were a young couple with a less than 1-year-old baby, we just were enveloped in the church. There were so many people that reached out. One of the things that Jim stressed as he was studying with me, and it was actually one of the things that I had to wrestle with, was that when you commit to the Lord, that means you give him your time too. And I was, at that time I was in my 20s. I played softball, I played basketball, I played golf. I was always busy. And yet he looked right at me and said, when you make this commitment, he expects you to be with his body on Sundays and on Wednesdays and maybe other times, and he expects you to serve and be in the Word and do all these things. And so it did take a little bit of I have to change. And so as Alice and I began this journey together, the difficult part is it was a little more apart. And we did stay in different places for quite a period of time. And we've attended several of the marriage enrichment type series that we've held at the church. And the quote that you talked about, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but I have a similar vision in my mind that said as long as her and I are seeking after the Lord, we're going to be at least in reasonable proximity to one another. Right, yeah. If we're both doing the same thing. And so that vision's always been in my mind. That's great. As well as Allison's. And it is matured. As we've grown older, as we've matured. Today, we're both retired. We spend upwards of 1 to 2 hours a day together in the Word, study, prayer, whatever it might be. And that's a true blessing. But I know the difficulty when you're working. And or you have kids. Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of things that vie for your time that are, I'll use the word distraction, even though you love your kids and your family and, the things that go on around you. You have to be able to draw some discipline to not become distracted from God because he wants to be first. Yes. Seek first the kingdom and then all the rest. And so it was difficult. And, we're like most married couples. There have been as many, issues we've had to deal through as everybody else. It's not like things magically went away. Yeah. And we, and we raised 2 boys and, they challenges there at times. And, all I can say is that I really stress to people today to every day spend time with God. Even if you think you only have 15 minutes, take them. Yeah. There are I have a devotional at home that a friend of mine gave me about fishing. It's about this big, and it's about, you can read it in about 30 seconds. But it gets you thinking in a frame. And then I can point you to other devotionals I have at home where you read them and they're so deep that it'll take you the next hour just to try to figure out the first paragraph. So, but take the time. You have to do that because if you want to listen to God and have him give you wisdom and direction in your life, you got to take time to listen. So you have to have that be still and know that I am God and allow him to talk to you. And he will. I honestly believe that. Christianity is not a religion of reading and orthodoxy. There is doctrine. There are things that are important and essential. But God wants to have a relationship with you, and you're reading the book Experiencing God. You can experience God in a very real way. But you have to take the time to do it. If you're always busy and distracted, you won't hear him.
How, so let's back up to you're raising kids in the church, which is a challenge for everybody too. And, how was that, those early years, they're easy because you're dragging them along, but as kids get older and more, more in tune, I guess, I shouldn't say in tune, just more pull too. How was that going? Or how did that go for you guys before they became young adults and like working with your kids? Hey, we're going to church Sunday. They played a ton of sports, knowing your background. How did you guys handle that? In today's world, it's even worse. My nephews are very involved in some sports, and you're just like, how do you guys find time to meet for church and go to and practice? How did you guys handle that?
It was a struggle, and you hit the nail on the head. It's even worse today. When our kids were first getting into sports, Wednesdays were still kind of church night, and the schools and the little leagues and the whatever were allowing those days to stay free. We just made it a priority. The boys did both play sports on travel clubs. And I can't tell you the number of different churches I attended across the country. Right. But one of the things that we did when we traveled is this is pre-GPS days, by the way. So you got on and you got maps and you got directions, and just part of those maps and directions was where is a church nearby that we can go to, and when do they meet? Right. And we made sure we went. Now I won't say there weren't times that we ended up in a place where there literally was not a church. Because my kids played hockey, and there's a lot of little towns. So we would take things with us that we would worship in our hotel room together. We attended, even in Omaha, we went to other churches because at the time Southwest had one service. And sometimes that service was at the wrong time. So we would find churches that had more flexibility. So we always made sure we worshiped. That's cool. Now, that is a huge challenge with today because it is a little different. I mean, you drive by a Little League baseball field on Sunday morning on the way to church at 8:30, and there's a ball game going on. So it is a big decision that families make on how to deal with that. The only thing that I can say is if those kids become grounded in the Lord, it is going to solve so many issues as they grow. And if they struggle with things, a lot of times it's because that priority was never established in their life in a very firm way. And I'm not saying that you can, just demand it of a child, but you have to put them in those places where they can experience God through others, through their own reading or prayer, but also through their peers. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why at Southwest we've always tried to have a strong youth presence for our kids, because we know what's going on out in the world, and it's not getting better; it's actually getting worse. Yeah. And so we have to provide that for them.
I heard a coach talk about this. Don't pass over on the youth. It's the only ones we got. Don't disregard the young. They're the only ones we got. So that's interesting. Thinking through, you mentioned you're doing your study with Jim, and how he said, and then you gotta give your time too, and you're obviously doing a lot of other hobby stuff, and you said you had to change. What was that? I feel like when I talk sometimes with people, and I myself, I'm like, I really like a lot of things about me, and I don't know if I have that much time to give to the church, and I don't know if I can change that much or way, or actually, I don't even know if I want to change that way. What is that conversation like, or what have you experienced with kind of dealing with that, kind of that spiritual takeover in a positive way, but just encountering that and it's kind of succumbing to it? Okay, I'm not going to resist this, but I got to give it a shot.
As a new Christian, obviously your faith is growing. Like I said, Jim was really clear about the expectation about counting the cost, and the scriptures about make sure that you got enough money to finish the tower, or don't go to battle against the army that you can't defeat. And so I had all these thoughts before I was baptized, and so I knew what was the busyness in my life. And so as a new Christian, I did some really crazy stuff. I mean, I would drive to Sioux Falls, play a softball game, and that night I'd get in the car and drive home so I could go to church in the morning, only to get back in the car after Bible class and head back to Sioux Falls to play another softball game in the afternoon. Wow. A lot of different things like that were done. But I think the one thing that I'll always challenge people with is if you come at God with an open heart and say, I will what you will, he will give you the time, the power, the talents, the limitless resources almost. There have been times at Southwest where I've been in positions of serving, whatever. The one that's coming to my mind is I was the deacon of the youth for a while, and we did not have a youth minister at the time. So we would arrange all of this stuff that our youth ministers do. In other words, the trips, the sleep-ins, the lock-ins, all of that stuff.
Very time.
We would work through it, and it took a lot of time, but I relied on the parents. You know, I have 2 little boys at this time. Bryce was 2 or 3, and Cody would have been 4 or 5. And I can't do it all. I can organize and give you some logistics, but then you got to step up. And I remember a specific time where we wanted to do a weekend retreat at the youth camp, and I had no idea what to do. I mean, literally, I remember having prayers like, God, I don't even know where to start. And all of a sudden, I had all these parents. And like, I remember a couple of parents says, "Hey, we'll take care of the food. Don't worry about the food."
Okay, so check that off the box.
Yep, we had a youth intern that summer previous, and that youth intern said, I had been in contact with him just, casually, just keep in touch. And I told him what was going on. He says, "Hey, I'll come down, and I bet you I can get 5 or 6 of the youth from," I think he went to Oklahoma Christian. "I'll come with me, and we'll help." Oh. And then, it was just one thing after the other, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
It always makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, I felt like it did nothing. And God just orchestrated it.
Right.
And all the other people helped out, and when it was all done, we just looked at each other.
Yeah.
And we all had an amazing time. We all experienced God. Yeah. The kids buzzed about it, and I knew it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And if I would have stopped and thought, before I said, I'd do it, and thought my own self, I would have said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Do you, that kind of brings up an interesting point of being involved in the church and being an instrument of the church. Like, people are apprehensive about getting involved, and then sometimes elders, shepherds, deacons have a hard time asking for help or assistance or volunteers, or it's more like, if we say it out to the crowd, at least I check that box, but I'm not guaranteeing anybody's going to say, "Oh, choose me, Lord, send me, I'll go," Right. So, how does, as an eldership or as shepherds, how do you guys balance that delegation and recruitment for works, Yeah,
it is very difficult. And one of the things that has changed over the years that I've been an elder is that, but I've been doing this for 16, 17, whatever. Yeah. And, now we have people that say, "Well, I'll serve, but I don't want to dedicate the next 15 years of my life to this," whatever it might be.
Okay.
And so we have had to learn to set some schedules or boundaries or whatever you want to call them. We would like you to come and do this for this period. At the end of that time, we'll revisit it. Yeah. If you want to move on, we'll move on. If you're still, entrenched in it, moved by it, right, feeling the call to do it, we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
And it is one of the things that the elders, we have spent a lot of time, I'd say, in the last 6 to 9 months in this very topic.
Okay.
What has happened, as you know, if you go back 4 years, 5 years, COVID happened. And we pulled back from meetings so much and various things. And quite honestly, the world changed. And in some ways, there were some changes brought into the church through that. And some churches didn't survive it.
Right.
We were blessed to survive it, and now we're moving through it, and in some ways, I would say thriving.
Okay.
With our new ministry staff and the young families. The kids that we have running around Southwest is amazing. But now trying to figure out how to get help to keep us moving and serving and growing. You're absolutely right. People like to be asked. Volunteering, sometimes they don't know exactly what they want to volunteer, or what is needed, and so there becomes a hesitancy.
Yeah.
Not for everybody. Right. Some people are just like, "I want to do this," and you're like, go for it. So we're now figuring out how to open up some lines of communication. Part of what Franklin did with his get plugged in form is just that.
Yeah.
I mean, those people that put down that I want to be involved in this, that, or the other ministry.
It's subtle too. It's written on a piece of paper. No one sees me put my arm up for this. It's enough what do you call it? Disclosure, or it's not. There's not too much transparency there, right?
It's right.
Yeah.
There's some commitment there, but what they're waiting for now is someone to contact them, which is the next phase.
Yeah. Let me know what you really need. I'm interested.
Yep.
I like that.
And then, but the next phase is elders, deacons, ministry leaders, yes, volunteers to support. And so there's this building from within of this leadership. And so that'll be something that you'll probably be hearing more about in the not too distant future from the eldership, is how we want to begin communicating and mentoring and bringing along new leaders to take some of these roles on in the future. I mean, each one of our elders, I think the youngest elder is 60 and the older is somewhere in the 70s.
Right.
And so we need to continue to grow. We currently have 5 deacons and the ministry leaders supporting as well. But are there new ministries we need to be doing? Are there some? There's some I know that we're not doing currently that need leadership. And we're in the process of trying to figure out who those people might be and getting them
shoring
involved.
up current ones, like
exactly, giving people help, so that we don't, have burnout. I mean, it's a very real thing. Our power supply is infinite if we stay plugged into it. But we are human and we get beat up. Things happen in our personal life, happen in our jobs, even sometimes happen in our ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's hard is keeping that eye on Jesus, keeping that focus upon the Lord, and knowing that He will provide. And there's a reason for what's happening. Maybe it's not the best at the moment, but there's growth happening. There's a good happening somewhere. He promises that in Scripture, that it's all working together for good for those that have been called according to His purpose. So we have to trust that there is good happening. We may never see it, but there's good.
What I guess 2 questions. So this, don't feel like I have to expand upon this, but just do you feel like our church, through the COVID experience, is still kind of experiencing COVID hangover, or do you feel like we've kind of come past, that's kind of now in the rearview mirror, and now we're really focusing forward? Because I think there's some churches that probably still feel some kind of hangover on that, that lethargy out of that experience. But I'm just kind of curious, what has that been felt like for you?
I think there might be some holdover yet, but I don't know if I would blame COVID for it. Now I would almost blame it for we have gotten used to church a certain way. Okay. And what we're, at least the eldership as we talk, what we're hoping to do is maybe change that paradigm. Brian just did that great series on koinonia, the fellowship. Okay, just by nature of that word means we get together. Yeah. Now, whether we get together in small groups, larger groups, all church groups, what does that look like? And I know that as an eldership, we've been talking about what that looks like. And like I said, in the not too distant future, we're going to start bringing forward some ideas and rolling some of those things out. And trying to make some paradigm shifts to give people more opportunity to draw close to their brothers and sisters, to draw close to the Lord. And so as we do that, I think we'll draw further and further away. I mean, I got to remember, I've been around Southwest long enough that I remember what Wednesday nights look like, what Sunday nights look like. I remember the change from Wednesday night classes to small groups.
So that was a big shift. So when you first started, how large was the church congregation back then?
We were not so different from where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar.
But different structure in terms of the ancillary programming from just Sunday service.
Right.
So you had classes on Wednesday versus small group meetings across the city.
Yes.
And they were all here in the church.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then you would still have class before church.
Yes.
Okay. So that was.
And we had 2 services back when we first started.
What times were those then?
Like 8:15 and then class and then afterwards.
And share the class and then. Yes. Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of ideas about what growth can look like and what it'll be. And, one of the things is the Southwest congregation really enjoys worshiping all together as one.
And we have the room to do it.
We have the room to do it right now.
Yep.
One thing, though, that I would challenge is we have an auditorium with 400 chairs in it, and we realistically, you get about 320 to 330, and then people begin to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I would challenge people to say right now on a Sunday morning, we're probably in that maybe mid to upper twos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we should be closing in on the 330. Mm-hmm. And then we should be in 2 services, and we should become 660.
Yeah.
And then we should become 990.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I can't remember who told me this, but when they look in an auditorium, they don't see the faces of the people in the seats. They see the empty seats and think, who should be there?
Oh, what a great,
or who would I love to be there?
Perspective, right?
Whether it's an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor or a friend.
Right. Yeah.
And so, that is something, too, that we want to do. We want Southwest to grow spiritually.
Yes.
But I think by virtue of growing spiritually, we'll probably end up growing numerically because God will bless us with those numbers.
And if you're growing spiritually, you want to share that. You don't want to hold on to that. And then then discipleship starts to happen, or people start to walk hand in hand in Christ in terms of just trying to get to know the Lord, right?
Right.
Very cool. So looking back, if we kind of do retrospect, then looking forward, what is there a time that maybe validation has occurred and you're like, gosh, this is, you mentioned the one time you were the deacon of the young, the youth, but any other times where you've seen, gosh, God is at work here in this church, and I was like, I'm so proud and also blessed. Any memories that come to come up, like, kind of looking in the rearview mirror?
I mean, there was a lot of them because, those are the, I don't know the words to use. Well, about anybody listening to this who knows me knows that I get emotional.
Join the club. You're in good company.
And those emotions usually flow from me hearing the Lord remind me of something, whether it's something in my own life or something that I've seen in the lives of other people.
Yeah.
Probably the latest one I think of is, Joyce Katzer's passing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the decision that she made and how she made it and the bravery she made it with, and yet the struggles that she still went through with that and that she allowed other people to help her through. And then the beauty of her passing and the assurance that we all have that she's with our Lord now, and then the celebration of the funeral. To me, that's one huge victory for Jesus.
Yeah.
From, if you know her early life and story, all the way through her years in the church until that final decision that I'm ready to go home.
Oh, wow.
And it's, it's amazing. And that's not the only story like that.
Right. Of course.
And whether it's, kids that, grow up as a terror and all of a sudden they're a youth minister, or there's all kinds of those things that happen. And honestly, we probably don't celebrate those things enough.
Right.
We tend to be moving on to the next to-do list or the next thing that we feel needs accomplished. And I know I'm really bad at anyways, just stopping and celebrating what just happened.
Right. What was your, I should have asked this question earlier. Growing up, what was your parents? You grew up in the Lutheran church, you said?
Yeah.
But were your parents strong Christians at the time, or was it kind of more of just did that and just cause, or what was that like?
I think a lot of it was our tradition, our habit to get up on Sunday mornings, go to church. I don't remember any, Monday through Saturday religious things until I got into confirmation.
Okay.
And then I was expected to go each, I think it's Wednesdays. I can't remember. I always look back on my folks and they were respected, good people, good parents. They were both, I don't want to say stoic, but it's not like my parents rushed up to me and gave me hugs and kisses when I entered a room. Yeah. Matter of fact, that was one of the things that I determined as a young adult. If I ever have kids, my kids are going to get more affection from me. And so, but they always pointed me in the right direction. If I were to go back to a person who kept me pointed in the right direction when I could have really slipped away, and one that maybe planted some seeds that stayed in me, so that when I told you Alice and I were searching, they were those seeds that were beginning to grow. It was my Uncle Denny and his wife Carol. They were, if you will, they were Jesus Revolution Christians. If you've seen that movie, and seen some of that, they came from that movement, and I remember going to services with them, and the way they would love Jesus and the worship that we'd go to. They had book racks through some Lincoln grocery stores that had religious books on them, and they would go and fill those, and people could buy them, and they'd see them. And I remember them giving me some of those books as say 10, 11, 12, 13, and I would read them and be amazed by, some of these people, whether it's Corrie ten Boom or various people like that. And and I remember as I did go through those rebellious years, I mean, I hit them, and probably from about 16 to, I don't know what, probably still somewhat rebellion, even as I was coming to the Lord. And he and Carol were always in the back of my mind, telling me about Jesus and his love, and that he loved me. Yeah. And so I knew something was missing. Cool. And I would have to say that was the seed that was planted at a young age that I returned to when I was older.
You must have spent a lot of time around them then. They were around quite a bit.
My Uncle Denny was my dad's youngest brother. Okay. He and Carol still live in Lincoln. They're in their 80s now. Okay. And my wife and I get together with them about once a quarter. Yeah. We find a way to get there, or they get here. Yeah. And the dynamics changed a little bit. Now we talk pretty serious about Scripture and different things, and he's often asking me about how Southwest is and how I'm holding up as an elder and things like that. Yeah. So, like I said, it's changed, but
more sage advice versus evangelical.
Right. But he's I would definitely say that it was my aunt and my uncle that were the early influence that kept me on the right path.
That's awesome. Who do you turn to now, though, for spiritual help, or just direction? Obviously you and Allison have a great relationship, which is amazing. Yeah. But it's nice as a man for me. Is there a man that you kind of turn to, like, gosh, I just need some direction here. I'm having a hard time with this, or I'm reading this. that doesn't make that sense to me. I'm not. Do you have anybody like that?
Well, one of the things is that the eldership in some ways becomes kind of like a small group. Okay. And so when it comes to some scriptures, particularly as they impact the whole church, we obviously, the iron sharpens iron, and we don't always see Proverbs, and we don't always see eye to eye about every issue that we study. Yeah. But the other area that I have in my life is we began a Wednesday small group. Boy, I'm not sure how long ago it was now, probably at least 5 or 6 years. And Kurt DeBoer was the one who started it, and he has a friend named Jerry Kelly, who's not a member at Southwest, but he and his wife are tremendous Christians and lovers of Jesus. And this small group came together of people from Southwest and people from outside of Southwest, and we came together and we studied some hard stuff.
And Kurt likes to do that. Hey, let's get the rocks. Let's get the meat, right? Like, we got to get to the meat of things,
And so, particularly Kurt and Jerry and I, it seems like we would end up together somewhere talking about something in depth. I know that Kurt has come to me with things for prayer. I know that, like when I was sick this last summer, Kurt would say, God woke me up at 2 a.m. and I prayed fervently for you. Wow. And
that's awesome.
And I knew I needed him. Yeah. It's almost like I could feel him in the midst of what was going on. Right. And so everybody needs those.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Dean Hamilton had a saying, and I know it wasn't his original, but he was always one that said, everybody needs a 2 o'clock friend.
Oh, yeah. He's mentioned that multiple times in the pulpit message to the congregation. I remember that. Everybody needs a 2 o'clock friend. He said that. Definitely jogs a memory. Yeah, that's a great point.
So we all need them. And, the iron sharpen iron piece, that's important too. Yeah. Let's put it this way. We're all men. We're wired a little different. Yeah. And we need we need somebody to help hold ourselves accountable sometimes.
And it can be a lonely place, especially if you're in places of leadership. Even I always talk about being a father can be lonely.
Right.
You're the only one in the household that's a father. That doesn't mean the woman, though, your wife can't feel lonely as a mother too. But the reality is you can feel that, and it feels like you're on an island a little bit. And it's super important for the community piece, the fellowship piece, to be in place, to be able to call a 2:00 friend. And I mean, if you don't have one, maybe you start looking a little harder because you need them. You do need them. That's such a true piece of advice. I think that's important. Looking forward, as you kind of see, since you are the longest tenured elder on the committee or the eldership, what do you see one of the biggest challenges that you guys are trying to tackle? You guys mentioned a little bit about the mentorship piece and identifying people who have different passions, interests, and talents, and also how to reach them. Is there anything else that's kind of close to the surface for you? It's like, gosh, we struggle with this, to be honest, as a church.
I think that I mentioned earlier that when I step back from it, and there's the phrase being an elder or being a shepherd. The longer time that I spend in this role, the more I want to be a shepherd. And the more I want to be able to allow others to deal with some of the things that an elder deals with.
Yeah, the business
of the church, if you will. I know that there are those in our body in the flock that want the elders to be deeply involved in all of those decisions to ensure that they're made from a spiritual perspective.
Sure.
But there are a lot of things we do that are just making sure this check got wrote for this or that or the other thing. And, we have great staff. Sarah does a great job with the bookkeeping and that, and Lynn helps her with the budget. And we have a lot of people that are doing a lot of things.
And we're trying to get some new ones. We got some retirees coming out.
Trying to get new people involved all the time. But I think the challenge is the shepherd should be amongst the flock and should be smelling like sheep. And when we get ourselves locked in a room trying to deal with a non-flock issue almost,
right?
That is something that we are trying to free ourselves from more and more.
Yeah.
And again, hoping that as we communicate more, get more help from more people, maybe establish some ministries to pick up in some places where maybe we've let them fall, that will allow the elders to be more available to the flock when they would like it, or even when the elder can just have time to reach out.
Sure.
Whether it's for prayer or encouragement, everybody goes through the hard times, everybody goes through highs and lows. And to be available as that shepherd, as that spiritual overseer when it's needed is where we want to get to.
Yeah, that's a great point. So in your infinite wisdom now and your own library at your house that you have, is there, as much reading you've done in the Bible, is there a couple of Bible verses that you just always go to? Like I kind of read through this and I just pray over this passage for me a lot. Is there something that kind of comes to mind?
The first one that you memorize and everybody has you memorize is one of the best summaries of the gospel message that we have. John 3:16. Yeah. It's gotten a bad rap because when you say that, you picture a guy in a rainbow wig or a T-shirt or eye black or whatever. But the truth is, if you just step back and think about it, God so loved the world that He gave. And God is preeminent in everything. And so that verse, if you only have one that you can pull out when you need it, it's that one.
Okay.
God so loves you that He gave His Son for you. And if you personalize that, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Other ones that I pull out, as an elder, when I think of difficult subjects and things to talk about, is I always go to Ephesians chapter 4. Verses 1 through 6, where it talks about it's for those that know me and whatnot, it's just the 7 ones. There's one Father, there is one Lord, there is one Spirit, there is one body, there is one baptism, there is one faith, and we just those are the essentials to me. Those are the things that make the church the church.
That's awesome.
And sometimes we get outside that, and we have to be charitable when we don't agree on everything else.
Yeah.
And I know there's hermeneutics that the church has used, and I know there's talks within the church of people that want to change some of that, and some are a little more willing than others. And how you study the Scripture and what you're looking for within that Scripture and why you're looking within that, all of those things come to the forefront. And we're called to the unity of the Spirit, which, by the way, we don't create it. We're called to maintain it. That unity is there because of the Spirit. And that bond of peace, we have all been given peace with God. Now, what are we going to do with it, church? That's what I hear the call being. And sometimes we stop and we create turmoil instead of maintaining that unity and that bond.
A little bit different focus, a little wrong focus.
A little bit different focus. Yeah. And probably one other place that I go, and it's not an individual verse, but if you step back from God and you just look upon His creation, look upon what He has revealed of Himself in the Word, whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, or revealed to you from a fellow believer. God is so deep and so big and so beyond our comprehension, even our ability to put it into words. If we can continue daily to capture that, it's going to bring us to awe. It's going to bring us to wonder. We're going to come into worship on Sunday morning, and it's going to be less about the songs that are being led or the person leading them or even what's said in the sermon or what's said in the Lord's table or prayers made. But it's going to be that you are so in awe of God walking in the midst of your brothers and sisters that you will worship and you will feel it in your very spirit, and your heart will be so enriched and sincere of that worship that all of these things we talk about, will I have time to serve? Should I serve? Where should I serve? They almost become afterthoughts because what really happens is you just fall on your knees and say, here am I, Lord, send me.
So just kind of closing up and wrapping up, try to kind of end on a light note. I asked, this is a little bit of stress. I'm asking you to be creative here for a minute, okay? I meant to get you this out to you before so you were not bombarded by this. So there's two major questions. First one is, are you more of an appetizer guy, main course, or dessert?
Okay. I am definitely a main course guy. There's some appetizers that I'll get. Yeah. My son loves Bryce. Yeah. Loves appetizers, so we always got to have a wing or a shrimp cocktail.
Yeah, something.
Anytime I eat with him. But I tell you what, for me, it's a good steak and maybe some potatoes to go with it. Now, in my girlish physique, I try to avoid some of that these days. Yeah. But definitely a main course guy. Right. Dessert, you would think I would. My wife is amazing at baking desserts. Maybe it's just because I've had so many that
overdone.
Yeah, I don't know.
Burn out on them.
Yeah, I know everybody else says they look at me and say, "You should weigh 500 pounds. Your wife is such a," and I agree with them. Yeah. But the thing they don't see is that she gives me a taste of everything she makes. Oh yeah. Then she cuts it up and gives it away, so I'm not tempted.
That's probably a good idea. Just give it away. Give it away. Last question. If you would give me two fallacies and a truth about yourself, and I've got to try to guess what the two fallacies are and what the truth is. Take your time. Don't need to rush to it.
All right. Two fallacies.
Just for my record, I am 2-0 guessing these on the last one with Franklin and with Jamie. So we'll see.
Two fallacies and one truth.
Yes.
Let's see. But it has to be just about me.
Yeah, just with you. Yeah, so just like,
Okay, two fallacies and a truth. All right. My greatest love growing up was playing basketball. And as much as I'm into sports, I was never able to play at the high school level.
Okay.
So that's two things. And the third would be that when I asked Allison out the first time, it was nearly a disaster.
I'm going to say that's the truth. No?
She asked me out.
It's so good. That's funny. Okay, so that was a false. I think you actually did play basketball in high school, but loved baseball growing up.
I loved basketball, but couldn't play in high school and played baseball.
Okay. There we go. Well, we got to learn a little bit more on this, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Thank you so much, Mike. This was awesome, and thank you for taking the time and being open to doing something new and out of your comfort zone. For the record, when I asked the elders about this, they did not know what podcasts were. They kind of knew what they were. Never have done one and never had listened to one. So this is a big win today. So it's awesome.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we asked people to step forward with their gifts and talents.
Here we are.
And that's what you're doing. So here I said, how can I say no?
That's right. Exactly. Awesome. Thanks so much. All right.